Hi, everybody. I'm Kat Margulis, and I'm the host of The Power of Story. And as a longtime journalist, author, and book coach, I tend to see story everywhere I go. But in recent years, I've seen how story can transform lives and businesses. And that's what I want to explore with you and my guests in this series is how you can create the life, the business, and the legacy of your dreams using story. So today I am so happy to have with me Mario Juarez. And Mario focuses on helping people and organizations get better business results through strategic storytelling. A former journalist and senior communications leader at the Microsoft Corporation, he founded StoryCo, a Seattle-based communications consultancy in 2018. His Storytelling for Impact program has proven successful in helping thousands of leaders, visionaries, technologists measurably improve their communications and presentation skills. Mario, thank you for being part of the Power Story.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Um, so gosh, where do I begin? So you help businesses maybe, and I might be stretching it a bit, but you help businesses find their story?
Well, yes, I help businesses find their story. I think the way that I do that most effectively is helping individuals within businesses and teams within businesses really find and learn how to craft and empower their stories.
And how do so and I hear that like where people don't it's not apparent for them what their story is or if it's interesting enough and how can people watching this right now what could you share to get them started on that journey of finding their story?
Yeah, well, I think that I would ask them to look in the mirror rather than look at the corporate website. I think that what happens to people in business, and I think this is a natural product of years of institutionalization, is that people come to believe that when they express themselves, the communications they give, the stories that they tell, all need to be done against a certain model. And it's almost as though people have learned another language. So people go through years of life and corporate work thinking that they need to talk a certain way or they need to act or sound like this leader or that leader, which of course is a really important thing to be able to understand the landscape. But I think we cross this line usually quite invisibly, quite unconsciously, where we lose touch with ourselves. And I think this is why people get lost. I think it's why people get lost in their lives. And I think it's why businesses sometimes lose their way. That constant communion with what's meaningful, that constant sense of awareness about why you're here, what you're doing, and who you're communicating with are the things that are the most essential. And I think they get lost, frankly.
Yeah, I really love that. And I did want to chat with you about like how can story help people find themselves again or find their way back to themselves again?
Well, so many ways, and the question's a good one because I think that is the ultimate benefit is finding your way back to yourself, and for an organization or a business to find its way back to its fundamental why. Stories always are rooted in the why of why what we're doing, what we're doing. And to get there, I think the very first thing is to have that awareness that you need to do it
Mhm.
and then go through some sort of a process, whether it's something like what I do. Great leaders tend to be great storytellers and often have that capability within themselves where they can instill changes in their culture and their organizations that are constantly doing that work. In fact, I would say if you are an organization and you don't have that commitment at the top, at the core, then to bring in a storyteller person like me or something, it's really just a sideshow. It really
Mm.
speaks to organizational health. And so, what I do is I have a whole framework and a process and a dozen different offerings that are designed and built and proven to help take people on this journey. But when I work with new clients, the first thing I do is ask for a conversation with the person at the top or the person as high up as possible so that I can look in their eyes and see where their intentions really lie. And if they're clear that this is something that is essential, that they're going to make the investment, then we can actually affect transformation.
Oh, wow. Oh, okay. There's so much there. So much there. I got to dig. I want to come back to and get into.
Dive in. It's the coolest stuff in the world.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm hearing is like the humanity in business, bringing humanity to business, if it was ever there to begin with, but definitely that is the way forward.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that important now?
Well, because everyone's disconnected, because we're living in a world of absolute fragmentation. This was a problem before the pandemic. It's a problem out of bounds now. I don't think we're anywhere near gauging the impact of what's happened to all of us over the last couple of years. And that's an individual phenomenon, but I think it's also true for organizations. And, it appears that we're headed for a significant economic reset with the recession that's upon us, that it's in its early stages. And I think we're going to see enormous change, enormous churn across the landscape of businesses as companies, wrestle with this question of why do they exist and what is it that they're really doing in the world. I mean, anyone that really studies this knows that, if a company's only motivation is profit, they'll get to a certain level. That's fine. That's great. Many of them fail. Companies that have a higher sense of their purpose, even if it's just somewhat ancillary or tied to other factors that drive them, but it authentically is grounded. Those companies, I think, are the ones that are going to change the world. And I think in 10 years, we're going to look back and we're going to see a change in the world. And I think that a lot of it will be based on a lot of the companies that you see that are going to be successful, not all of them, are going to be ones that sort of tune into this to the dynamics that story surrounds, which is around a sense of authenticity, around a sense of understanding, and around an extraordinarily deep and ongoing daily exercise of empathy, because that's what storytelling is fundamentally about. If you're not empathetic, you're really just a sideshow. And then those stories won't ever be good. I feel like I'm wandering far away from your question, but this goes in so many different ways. You got to rein me back in here.
I love it. You know what? Because I do a few interviews a day for this series, and each day has a flavor. And I love today's flavor, which is like the future is bright and beautiful and human and dynamic. And I'm really excited for where everything seems to be going. Let's talk about transformation.
Sure.
What role is transformation in the work that you're doing? With regards to business and storytelling, how do they all work together?
Well, such a huge question, and so it has so many faces. I mean, there's all kinds of transformation, right? There's lots of negative kinds of transformation. There's transformation that is destructive. There's transformation that is extraordinarily positive. And I think we're in a world now where we're going to see both of those currents and many other permutations that resonate with them, that are going to just be all around us in this grand churn. The one that interests me is the transformation to a place of authenticity and sort of genuine energy in what you're doing. And that, I do believe, really begins at an individual level. And there's the work that I do in my workshops. I do long, sometimes full day, multi-day workshops with people. And the value proposition in that is that every person that participates is going to go through the process of authoring a story. I might try to do this in 45 minutes if I can. And then at the far end, I work with people to, build basically effectively TED Talks.
Wow.
A couple of cases, people that do TED Talks, but I have one offering where I'll do a workshop with a large group of people. We'll take 5 or 10 of them. I will work with them for 2 months to build their own TED Talk, and then they go back and deliver that to their organization. And that is an incredibly powerful and it's a personally and organizationally transformative exercise, and it's incredibly cool. And that is, I think, the dynamic is that when from an organizational point of view, if you really want to affect transformation through story, you begin with the individuals and you invite everyone in the team, everyone involved, to go through this process. And the process begins with the question of, why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you here? and what is meaningful in your work. We go through life, we have this idea that we are measuring. I don't know if you've seen this whole notion of like measurement, measure what matters, OKRs,
Mhm.
objectives and key results, measure what, which is a fine and wonderful thing. But I just laugh at it and I'm like, are you measuring? I'll say to be, are you measuring what matters to you? I mean, how do you measure it? What documents have you got? Right? We've all got our resume. We've got that CV. We've got our LinkedIn page. But is that the stuff that matters? I ask people to imagine that purely an exercise. Imagine that they have departed this planet, right? A
Mhm.
piano fell out of the sky and they're gone, and the funeral is tomorrow. And who is coming to that funeral? And what are they saying about it? They're going to say, wow, she was amazing. She made director at 32. Nobody does that. We have this whole resume of what's actually, our eulogy resume, which is all the things we want people to say. And this is a really powerful thing to do in a professional setting, to ask people to integrate their full selves in the considerations they have while they're sitting in that chair, in that room.
Mm.
Because the things that drive us, are all around love. I mean, they're all about relationships. Those are the things that actually matter to us.
Mhm.
And we are constantly segregating that in business from the terms, that language that I mentioned earlier about how we're allowed to talk, or how we think we're allowed to talk.
Mhm.
And I do this, and I've had people, I had this one time, always remember this, very early on when I was doing this work. I did one of these workshops for a group of salespeople, corporate salespeople, really big time, big money guys, and gals, people making $2-3 million a year. And I did this exercise, and this man calls me up and he sends me an email and he says, I have to have lunch with you right away. So I said, fine. I go to the restaurant, and here comes this guy. He looks like a former professional football player who just like super smart, super focused, all buttoned up. And he sits down and he's just deadly serious. And he looks me in the eye and he says, I have to tell you, your workshop was a seminal event in my life. Okay, why? And he said, because I realized that I'm in the wrong job, that I don't even know why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I just submitted my resignation.
What? Oh,
And
wow.
that was not why the company hired me. I often feel
Oops.
that what I do is extremely subversive. And if only the sponsors knew, we can edit this part out. But it
Oh.
really speaks to this question of getting your people re-engaged. I think
Yeah.
there's usually a high percentage, especially in really great organizations, there's a high percentage of people that
Mm.
are authentically engaged. And so it's
Mhm.
not like we're asking them to find something in themselves that pulls them away. Quite the
Mhm.
contrary. Usually I've had people realize, I just was working with this researcher in China, this group of brilliant people that are doing amazing things at a research lab in Beijing. And this woman was working on the creation of a virtual being. A virtual being. If you remember the movie Her, about
Wow.
10 years ago,
Mm.
there was this man who fell in love with his, with Siri, basically on his phone, with this virtual assistant he got with an operating system upgrade. And it's somewhat like that. And she is one of these astonishing people that you meet sometimes. She's like 28 and she's got 5 degrees and she's brilliant. And I'm asking her why are you doing this? So
Mm.
because she's working on one of these TED Talks, and she's like, okay, I'm and it's very interesting and fascinating, and they can talk about all these AI models and machine learning, but I'm like, why are you doing it? What's driving you? And we worked on it for about a half an hour, and she said, oh, my aunt. Your
Oh.
aunt, what about your aunt? And she said, my mom just came and visited me. We live we're from a village far away, hours away, and we had a bad time because because her sister kept calling me, and her sister's lonely, and her husband died, her daughter moved away, and she's living in this home in this little village in China, and she's lonely, and her cognitive functions are declining, and she
Mm.
has no one to talk to. And she says, I realize that I do this because I'm thinking of her, and I want to give her the thing that she needs so that her life will be a little less lonesome. So that's an
Yeah.
example of how people just find these ways to connect with the things that are really underlie their motivations as human,
Yeah.
and bring that into work, and then constantly augment that with the awareness of the people around them so that they're
Yeah.
making these connections. And it's all about connection.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine that must be transforming the businesses that you work with. It must take a tremendous amount of trust. It's almost counterintuitive from, the corporate world that we grew up in. It's
Mhm.
it's such a shift. That I don't know. It takes tell me, I don't, how are do they know what they're signing up for? When you
Well,
go in
most of the
there?
people that I work with do, because almost all of my business, and this is not necessarily a good thing, comes from referrals. And so it's
Uh-huh.
usually
Right.
someone that says, we just did this amazing thing, and people are
Yes.
like, well, how do we get that? And that's but again, I always have that conversation up front, because I really
Yes.
do need to gauge whether leadership is aware of this. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that one of the things that your question speaks to is the fact that you are asking people to become vulnerable and to take these
Mhm.
really massive risks. And
Yes.
it has to be established up front
Yeah.
that it's safe. Now, the way that I conduct these, I can create an in the room or in the Zoom
Yeah.
situation where people feel safe in that moment.
Yeah.
But the organization has to back that up,
Yeah.
and it has to be modeled authentically by
Yeah.
leadership. And if it's
Yeah.
not, then it's actually a risk.
Yeah.
People, but I honestly, I've had some cases where people, and I won't name names, but I have had cases where I've done this where there haven't been
Yeah.
those factors of trust up front, but I go through the process. And again, I've had people come to me and say, my life, I go back to them a year later, and they said, yeah, out of that experience, my life took a different direction, because I knew that that was the case, and I realized I was in the wrong place.
Yeah.
And so that brand of person that wants to deal with that wants to operate authentically, that wants to have meaning in his or her life, is gonna not want to be in one of those organizations anyway. And I think way too many people, I think there's an epidemic of people that are trying to convince themselves that the crappy environment that they're working in is
Mhm.
okay for them, and that they can tolerate another day.
Mm.
And I'm a huge advocate to I mean, my own personal story is one of
Yes.
of discovering that I had really lost myself,
Mhm.
and that this was, my passion to do this, and that betting on my passion against all odds was the only way to save my life. And
Mm.
and I think there are so many people. I think
Yeah.
so many people that are lonely. I think there's so many people that get, they wake up and they put their feet on the floor in the morning, and they're just like, get me, Lord, get me through another day.
Mm.
I hate it. I'm not happy. I don't feel like this is my life. I don't feel like I'm living for me.
Yeah.
And corporate life is all about, and I mean, not any one particular corporation, but I think in the capitalist world, corporate life,
Yes.
companies want you to go through that experience, because then they own you, and then
Yes.
they get you away from everyone questioning, and anything that's wrong in your life, you're kind of led to believe, well, that's because that's your deficiency. And the
Yes.
reason you're not more successful and you haven't gotten up to the top of the ladder or anything is you just haven't worked hard enough. You just haven't
Mhm.
tried hard enough. And companies make these huge investments to build those systems, which of course is fine and legitimate, because they need
Mm.
retention.
Yeah.
Um, But really healthy companies will do that, and they'll also constantly invite people to gauge these factors
Yeah.
of their own sense of connection and value, and whether it's worth being there.
I mean, I'm hearing story transform lives, your life, and some of the people who've done your workshops. I'm hearing them transform lives. And I imagine going through that experience in a business with the leaders and people of all the different levels. I imagine that would be transforming the culture.
Oh, it does.
You know what I mean? But the whole point was to transform how they relate to their customers and clients and audiences. So
Mhm.
there's like this multi-level transformation happening.
Well, there's no doubt about it. I mean, my biggest customer is Microsoft, and I worked at Microsoft, as per your introduction of me, for many years, quite by accident. Was never my plan, and which is both a good and a bad thing. That was a company that was run by the world's worst storytellers, but some of the world's greatest innovators and business people.
Mm.
So when people think of Microsoft, think Bill Gates, they think of Windows, people that know the business, and this giant money machine that transformed the world with a lot of things. But it was about 8 years ago, 9 years ago, the company was dead in the water. I mean, people don't maybe really remember that Bill Gates left the company. He had a successor. His right-hand person, Steve Ballmer, came in, and the company languished, and it was really doomed because they were stuck in the past, and they were stuck in this mindset of being monopolists, basically, and this worldview that had worked for them so well through the 90s. By the first decade of the 21st century, was really dooming them. And credit to the board and credit to Bill Gates. They made a 180 change, and they brought in an entirely different person to run the company. And this was a man named Satya Nadella. And I had a brief stint right before that promotion of his, where I was working closely with him for about 6 months, helping with his communications and his storytelling. And he was such a different storyteller. He was just he viewed it as this incredibly critical competency, and that you couldn't succeed without it. Which honestly, if I'd have said 20 years ago at Microsoft that I was going to do a storytelling company, when the laughter stopped, they would have said, "Now go back to work." And this guy's standing up and going, story is everything. We are a storytelling company because that is our avenue to connection with our customers and our brand. And, Microsoft's now, what, a $2 trillion company? It's still one of the top 2 or 3 most important companies in the world. And it's been completely transformed. And I would contend that it is the product, that growth is the product of not simply just storytelling, but the mindset that accompanies it. There's Carol Dweck's growth mindset, which is incredibly powerful and important concept. It is hand in hand with what I call the storytelling mindset, which is this constant sense of engagement, this constant sense of checking in with yourself, of checking your own narratives across everything, especially in your own head, and especially in companies, and what leaders are actually doing, because doing is its own form of narrative. And then checking that against what that your target audience is, your customers, your potential employees, your stakeholders, your shareholders, knowing what they need and knowing how to fashion what you say, and consequently what you do, on terms that are going to resonate and that are going to drive that mutual success. And when you get that kind of circular, constant, generative energy, that is storytelling, but it's all so much of good life. I don't even know where you draw the line between the storytelling and the living.
Oh my gosh. I love that. Like, so excited about this. I'm so excited about this.
Me too.
Oh yeah, just so powerful. And especially to be led by a company like that, that's so well known, and to see how it's transforming them and working for them. And I just love what you said about what did you say? I got to come back and rewind it about they are a storytelling company. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
that's so
Apple's a
cool.
storytelling company. I mean, Nike is a storytelling company. I think there's so many examples, of companies that are using it. I mean, it's very interesting, just as kind of
Yeah.
along these lines. When I first started this crazy idea, because this idea of, StoryCo, storytelling for impact, it was just something I made up on my patio with a glass of wine one Sunday afternoon. I mean, quite literally. It was never anything that was assigned to me or that I ever imagined was going to become my life. It was just the thing that was interesting to me, and I did that out of this core passion of thinking that this was the thing that mattered. I had no idea that it was going to, open up, that it was going to take me to all these fundamental places. And I think that's the experience that a lot of my clients have when they
Yeah.
say, "Oh, well, storytelling, sure, we'll do storytelling, as who doesn't love storytelling?" But then it becomes something much more profound.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just gonna throw the rest of the questions away. Chew on that for a while, folks. Chew on that one for a while. Um, yes. Yeah, that's just so much gold and beauty. And I'm just really looking forward to the future that you are helping to co-create in fashion and the ripple effect that you are creating and what will come from that. That was really, really
Yeah.
wonderful chatting with you, Mario.
Well, it's wonderful chatting with you.
Thank you.
That's
Gosh, I want to come work with you now.
good stuff. Everyone, everyone should.
Before I let you off the hook, though, is there anything else you want to share with the audience today?
The one thing that I would say to everybody is that you should really start paying attention to the narratives that are in your mind. The average person, it's a stat I use in my workshop, the average person participates in over 2,000 stories a day. More than 1,400 of which are just daydreams. 12 to 1,400 are just daydreams. Average daydream 15 to 30 seconds. And the narrative that's going through your mind really is your life. And this is where mindfulness is such a critical thing, that ability to stop the crazy monkey chatter in your brain and sit back and just look at it non-judgmentally with
Mhm.
no demand. Just say, what are the words
Mhm.
that are in my consciousness, and what are the narratives that I'm snapping to? If you want to change your life, that is the place to begin.
Mhm.
And do it, as I say, without judgment. Don't beat yourself up. Just say, hey, this is really who I am right now.
Mhm.
These are the stories that engage me. These are the things that are on my mind. These are my dreams at night. These are the things that I'm saying to myself. And you can really change yourself. I mean, at some level, if you really pay attention to that, many people are like, I need to stop everything I'm doing and become a different, because this isn't who I
Mhm.
want to be.
Mhm.
Even if it's just noise and social media nonsense and everything. Look inside yourself, see what your own stories are that you're telling yourself, and you can begin there to actually affect a personal transformation that can lead to so many other good things.
Oh, so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you
You're
for
so
sharing
welcome.
that. Thanks. Um, Thank you, Mario. Really beautiful, beautiful interview. And I just loved everything you shared today.
Thank
Um,
you. I love being here.
yeah. Thank you all to everybody watching at home. I hope this has been transformative for you. Remember, there's going to be a Power of Story workshop on October 24th. So keep an eye out for that. And we've got more amazing interviews coming up. Mario, what a pleasure. Love chatting with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. See you soon.